A single act of kindness costs a struggling single mother her job. For offering a warm glass of milk to a shivering old man who couldn't pay, Emma Carson was publicly humiliated and fired, cast out into the cold rain with her world falling apart. She believed she had lost everything, but what she didn't know was that her simple, compassionate gesture had set in motion a chain of events that would unravel a web of deceit and change her life forever. The very next morning, a long black limousine would pull up to her doorstep, and the battle for her future would begin. The scent of steamed milk and sweet caramel syrup hung heavy in the air, a permanent fixture of the Dairy Haven Cafe. For Emma Carson, it was the smell of survival. It was the scent of another 5 a.m. start, of wrestling her 6-year-old son, Tyler, into his clothes, and of the hurried kiss on his forehead as she dropped him at her neighbor's apartment before biking through the pre-dawn chill. The cafe was a franchise, one of hundreds, and it prided itself on ruthless efficiency. Every ounce of milk was counted, every splash of cream was measured, and every second of an employee's time was monetized. Presiding over this small kingdom of dairy-based misery was Marcus Hartwell, a man whose spine seemed to have been replaced by a corporate policy manual. His thin lips were perpetually pursed in a state of preemptive disapproval, and his eyes, small and dark, missed nothing. He saw a splash of spilled milk, not as an accident, but as a direct assault on the month's profit margin. Emma was a good worker. She was fast, efficient, and she had mastered the art of the placid customer service smile, a mask that hid the gnawing anxiety of overdue bills and Tyler's outgrown shoes. She moved through the morning rush in a blur of motion, steaming milk, pouring shakes, calling out names, and wiping down the perpetually sticky counters. She was a ghost in the machine, another interchangeable part in Marcus's well-oiled operation. For the past few months, an old man had become irregular. Though regular was a loose term, he never bought anything. He would appear in the late morning after the rush had subsided and sink into the worn armchair in the far corner. He was a whisper of a man, thin and frail, with a neatly trimmed white beard that couldn't hide the deep-set weariness in his face. He wore the same charcoal gray wool coat every day, regardless of the weather. It was a good coat once, Emma thought, but now the elbows were shiny with wear and the hem was beginning to fray. He would just sit there for an hour, nursing a glass of tap water, staring out the window at the relentless hustle of the city. He never spoke to anyone, never caused a problem. The other staff, taking their cue from Marcus, ignored him or shot him looks of annoyance. To them, he was a loiterer, a non-customer, taking up valuable real estate. But Emma saw something different. She saw the tremor in his hands as he lifted the glass of water. She saw the way his gaze would sometimes linger on a family, laughing at a nearby table, a flicker of profound sadness in his pale blue eyes. He reminded her of her grandfather in his final years, a man who had been full of stories and life, reduced by time to a silent observer on the periphery of the world. She started making small gestures. When clearing a nearby table, she'd ask, "Are you doing okay, sir?" He would just nod, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. One day, she left a newspaper someone had abandoned on his table. He looked up at her, his eyes conveying a gratitude so immense it startled her. From then on, it became their silent ritual. Marcus noticed, of course. "Carson," he'd snapped one afternoon, his voice a low hiss, "stop fraternizing with the vagrant. We are not a public library or a shelter. If he's not a paying customer, he is a liability. Your job is to sell milk products, not to run a charity." Emma just nodded, her jaw tight. "Yes, Mr. Hartwell." But she didn't stop. Her small kindnesses felt like a quiet rebellion, a tiny spark of humanity in the sterile transactional world of the Dairy Haven. It was the only part of her job that didn't feel like it was slowly draining the life from her. She needed that spark as much as she needed the meager paycheck that barely kept her and Tyler afloat. The third Thursday of October arrived with a vengeance. A biting, sleet-filled rain lashed against the large windows of the dairy haven, painting the world outside in blurry, miserable shades of gray. The cafe's heating system was struggling against the cold, and a damp chill seemed to seep in through the very walls. Emma, having biked through the downpour, could still feel the cold in her bones hours into her shift. The lunch rush was brutal. Customers, miserable from the weather, were short-tempered and demanding. Marcus Hartwell was in rare form, stalking behind the counter like a predator, pointing out a misaligned stack of napkins here, a fingerprint on the milk steamer there. His presence was a constant oppressive weight, making everyone's hands clench and their smiles tighten. It was around 2:00 in the afternoon when the old man came in. He looked worse than Emma had ever seen him. His worn wool coat was soaked through, plastered to his thin frame. He was shivering violently, a constant, uncontrollable tremor that shook his entire body. His face was ashen, and his pale blue eyes seemed lost in a fog of cold and exhaustion. He shuffled to his usual corner and collapsed into the armchair, his breath coming in ragged, shallow puffs. Emma watched him from behind the counter, her heart clenching. He wasn't just old and lonely today. He looked genuinely unwell. He huddled in the chair, trying to chafe some warmth back into his hands, but it was a useless effort. The cafe was momentarily quiet. Marcus was in his small office, likely counting the morning's receipts with religious fervor. The other barista, a college kid named Jake, was restocking syrups, oblivious. Emma felt a powerful, undeniable urge to do something. Policy, profit margins, and Marcus's wrath all faded into the background, replaced by a simple, profound human impulse. She waited for a moment when no customers were at the counter. A fresh batch of whole milk had just been warmed, its rich aroma a stark contrast to the damp cold. Marcus had a strict rule. Any warmed milk not sold within 20 minutes was to be poured down the drain. It was waste, but it maintained a standard of freshness. This batch had about 5 minutes left on its timer. Her hands moved before her brain could argue. She took a clean ceramic mug, not one of the paper-to-go cups, and filled it with the steaming white milk. Placing it on a small saucer with a couple of sugar packets and a spoon, she walked out from behind the counter. Her footsteps were quiet on the tiled floor. When she reached the corner, the old man didn't seem to notice her at first. His eyes were closed, his head leaning back against the chair. "Sir," she said softly. His eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused for a moment. Then they found her. She held out the mug. "I thought you could use this," she whispered. "It's on the house. Please drink it before it gets cold." For a long moment he just stared at the mug, then at her face. A complex storm of emotions seemed to pass through his eyes, confusion, suspicion, and then a dawning, heart-wrenching gratitude. His trembling hands reached out and closed around the warm ceramic. The simple heat seemed to steady him. He brought the mug to his lips with a shaking motion and took a slow, deep sip. A hint of color returned to his cheeks. He looked at her, his eyes now clear and focused. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, a single tear traced a path down his weathered cheek. He simply nodded, a gesture that conveyed more than 1,000 words. Emma's heart ached. She gave him a small, genuine smile and turned to walk back to the counter, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the cafe's faulty heating. "What in God's name do you think you're doing?" "Carson!" The voice was cold, sharp, and cut through the quiet cafe like a shard of glass. Marcus Hartwell stood by the end of the counter, his arms crossed, his face a mask of incandescent fury. He had seen the entire exchange. "Mr. Hartwell, Emma started, her voice faltering. "Don't you Mr. Hartwell me?" he snarled, keeping his voice low but venomous, so the few remaining customers wouldn't fully overhear. "Did you run a transaction for that product?" "No, but it was from the batch we were about to throw out. It wasn't going to be sold. It was waste." "It is not waste until I say it's waste," he seethed. "It is company property. You stole it. You stole company property and gave it to that..." That freeloader." He gestured dismissively towards the old man, who was now watching the scene with wide, alarmed eyes. The milk mug held tightly in his hands. "I didn't steal anything," Emma said, her own anger starting to rise above her fear. "He was freezing. It was a simple glass of milk. It was the decent thing to do." "Decency doesn't pay the bills, Carson. Policy does. Procedure does." Marcus's face was inches from hers. "Now I have given you warnings. I have told you not to engage with him. You have directly, willfully, and flagrantly violated company policy on inventory management and customer engagement." "It's a glass of milk that was going down the drain," she shot back, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Marcus's eyes narrowed to slits. He seemed to relish the moment, the absolute power he held over her. He straightened up, and his voice suddenly became loud, formal, and performative. "Emma Carson," he announced, loud enough for everyone in the cafe to turn and stare, "as the manager of this establishment, I am terminating your employment effective immediately for theft of company property and gross insubordination. Pack your personal belongings from your locker. You have 2 minutes to vacate the premises." The words hit her like a physical blow. Fired. Just like that. The floor seemed to drop out from under her. The stares of the customers felt like daggers. She could see Jake, the other barista, frozen in place, his eyes wide with shock. In the corner, the old man looked utterly horrified, as if he were somehow responsible. Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. Her mind raced with a panicked litany. Rent, Tyler, food, the electricity bill. "You can't be serious," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. "I have never been more serious in my life," Marcus said, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. "Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. Now get out." He turned his back on her, dismissing her as if she were nothing more than a spilled drink to be mopped up. Numbly, Emma walked to the staff room in the back, her body moving on autopilot. She grabbed her worn purse and the thin jacket from her locker. She could feel the tears welling, but she refused to let Marcus see her cry. She walked back out, head held high, refusing to look at anyone. But as she reached the door, her eyes involuntarily flicked to the corner. The old man was on his feet, his face etched with distress. He took a hesitant step towards her, opening his mouth as if to protest, to say something. Emma just gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It wasn't his fault. Then she pushed the door open and stepped out into the freezing rain, the sound of the cafe's bell tinkling softly behind her, signaling an end she never saw coming. The cold rain was a merciless shock, instantly soaking her thin jacket and plastering her hair to her scalp. Just minutes before, she had been in the relative warmth of the cafe, a place of employment, a source of a steady, if meager, income. Now she was on the street, jobless, with the biting wind whipping around her. The bike ride home was an impossibility. Tears mixed with the rain on her face, blurring her vision. She started walking, a long 3-mile trek to her small apartment on the other side of town. Each step was heavy, each squelch of her soaked sneakers a miserable reminder of her new reality. The words echoed in her head, a cruel, looping chorus. Terminating your employment. Theft of company property. Get out. Theft. He had called her a thief for a glass of milk that would have been poured down a drain. The absurdity of it was almost comical, but the consequences were devastatingly real. A cold, hard knot of panic was tightening in her stomach. Her mind spun frantically, trying to grasp the situation. The rent was due next week, $850. She had about $400 in her checking account. The final paycheck Marcus had mentioned would be less than that, and who knew when it would actually arrive? Tyler needed a new winter coat. She had been planning to buy one this weekend. The refrigerator was half empty. The city lights blurred into long, watery streaks. Every passing car, every warm, glowing window of a shop or restaurant felt like a personal mockery of her situation. People were living their lives, warm and secure, while hers had just been detonated by a petty tyrant over a gesture of human kindness. Was that what it was all about? She replayed the scene over and over. Was it really the milk? Or was it that she had dared to operate on a different set of principles than Marcus's? She had chosen compassion over policy, humanity over profit. In the sterile world of the dairy haven, that was an unforgivable sin. She had shown a loyalty to a fellow human being that Marcus demanded be reserved for the corporation. An hour later, she finally reached her apartment building, a tired-looking 3-story walk-up. She was shivering uncontrollably. Her clothes dripping a puddle onto the worn linoleum of the lobby. She trudged up the 2 flights of stairs, her legs aching, her spirit feeling utterly crushed. She quietly let herself into the apartment she shared with Tyler. Her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, a kindly widow who watched Tyler for a pittance, was sitting on the sofa helping him with a drawing. "Emma, dear, you're home so early," Mrs. Patterson said, her cheerful tone dying as she took in Emma's drenched and miserable appearance. "Goodness, child, what happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." Tyler ran to her, wrapping his arms around her wet legs. "Mommy, you're all wet." Emma forced a smile that felt like it would crack her face. She hugged her son tightly, burying her face in his hair, trying to draw strength from him. "It's okay, sweetie. Mommy just got caught in the rain." She couldn't bring herself to tell them the truth. Not yet. The shame was too raw. After Mrs. Patterson left, Emma peeled off her wet clothes and took a hot shower, hoping it would wash away the chill and the humiliation. But as she stood under the steaming water, the tears she had held back finally came, hot and silent, mingling with the spray. Later that evening, as Tyler slept soundly in his small room, Emma sat at their tiny kitchen table. The unpaid bills spread out before her like a tarot reading of a bleak future. The panic was no longer a knot. It was a living, breathing monster with its claws wrapped around her throat. She opened her laptop. The screen a harsh glare in the dim light. Job search websites. Barista, waitress, cashier, minimum wage. Each listing blurred into the next. Most required online applications, lengthy forms that would be swallowed by algorithms. She would be just another name, another applicant number. And what would she say when they asked why she left her last job? Fired for theft. The accusation, as ridiculous as it was, would be a black mark against her, a poison that could taint every application. Hours ticked by. The rain finally stopped, leaving behind a profound, unnerving silence. The city outside was asleep. Emma felt a sense of isolation so profound it was a physical ache. She had always prided herself on being a survivor, on her ability to handle whatever life threw at her for Tyler's sake. But for the first time, she felt truly, utterly hopeless. She thought of the old man. She hoped he was warm. She hoped he had finished the milk. And then a bitter, resentful thought crept in. Why him? Why did her life have to implode over him? He would go on with his life, and she was left to pick up the shattered pieces of hers. It wasn't his fault, she knew. But in the dark, lonely hours of the night, it was easier to feel angry than to feel afraid. She finally closed the laptop, the weight of the world on her shoulders. She checked on Tyler, pulling his blanket up to his chin and kissing his forehead. His peaceful, sleeping face was the only thing that kept the despair from completely overwhelming her. "I'll figure it out, sweetie," she whispered into the darkness of the room. "I promise I'll figure it out." But as she crawled into her own bed, the promise felt hollow, a lie she told to the one person who trusted her completely. Sleep wouldn't come. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the drip of water from the eaves outside, each drop counting down the seconds to a future she couldn't bear to face. The morning arrived gray and oppressive, a perfect reflection of Emma's mood. A restless night had done nothing to calm her anxieties. If anything, the harsh light of day made them feel more real, more urgent. After a breakfast of toast and the last of the milk, she took Tyler to school, the forced cheerfulness in her voice sounding foreign and brittle to her own ears. Returning to the silent apartment, the weight of her unemployment pressed down on her. She spent the morning in a frantic, dispiriting cycle, scouring job boards, tweaking her resume, and firing off applications into the digital void. Each click of the submit button feeling like a tiny prayer sent to an indifferent God. The question of her dismissal loomed over every application. She settled on a vague, sanitized reason for leaving, incompatible with management. It felt weak, deceptive. Around 11 a.m., a strange sound broke her concentration. It was a low, powerful rumble, the sound of an engine unlike any of the sputtering, noisy cars that usually populated their street. She glanced out the window and her breath caught in her throat. Parked directly in front of her building, double-parked and commanding the entire street, was a limousine. It wasn't just a car, it was a statement. Long, black, and gleaming, with windows so darkly tinted they reflected the gray sky like polished obsidian. It was so out of place in her working-class neighborhood that it might as well have been a spaceship. Neighbors peeked out of their windows. A few people on the sidewalk stopped and stared, their curiosity piqued. Emma's first thought was that they had the wrong address. Her second, a jolt of pure panic, was that it was some kind of high-end debt collector. Was she that far behind on a bill that they sent a limo? The thought was absurd, but her mind was already primed for catastrophe. She watched, frozen, as the back door opened. A man stepped out. He was in his late 40s, tall and impeccably dressed in a dark tailored suit with a crisp white shirt and a silver tie. He held a sleek leather briefcase in one hand. His hair was perfectly styled, and he had the calm, confident air of someone who was accustomed to being in control. He scanned the front of her building, his eyes seeming to land directly on her window. Emma instinctively stepped back, her heart hammering against her ribs. A moment later, the sharp, authoritative rap of a knock echoed from her front door. It wasn't the friendly tap of Mrs. Patterson or the thud of a package delivery. It was precise and insistent. She stood paralyzed in her living room, her mind racing. Who was he? What could he possibly want with her? Should she answer it? Maybe if she stayed quiet, he would go away. But the knock came again, louder this time, more demanding. Taking a deep, shaky breath, she crept to the door and peered through the peephole. The distorted fisheye lens showed the man in the suit standing patiently in the hallway. He wasn't going anywhere. Her hand trembled as she unlatched the deadbolt. She opened the door just a crack, leaving the security chain in place. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The man's expression was professional, not unkind. "Are you Miss Emma Carson?" he asked, his voice smooth and measured. "Yes." "My name is Richard Morrison. I'm an attorney." He held up a business card. Even from a distance, she could see the expensive embossed lettering. "I represent a client who has asked me to speak with you. May I come in for a moment?" An attorney? Emma's mind went blank. The panic returned tenfold. Was she being sued? Was the Dairy Haven suing her for the stolen milk? Was Marcus Hartwell pressing charges? It seemed insane, but then so did getting fired in the first place. I don't understand. I can't afford a lawyer. I haven't done anything." "You are not in any trouble, Miss Carson." "I assure you," Mr. Morrison said calmly, seeming to read the fear on her face. "Quite the opposite. My client has a business proposition for you. It concerns the events of yesterday at the Dairy Haven Cafe." Emma stared at him, bewildered. A business proposition? Her? The only person she had interacted with besides Marcus was the old man. Could it be him? But how could a man who couldn't afford a glass of milk possibly afford a high-powered lawyer and a limousine? It made no sense. "I'm sorry. I'm very confused," she stammered. "I understand completely," the lawyer replied with practiced patience. "It would be much easier to explain if you would be willing to accompany me. My client would like to meet with you in person. He is waiting for us." "Accompany you where?" "Back to the Dairy Haven Cafe," he said. The suggestion was so bizarre, so utterly unthinkable, that Emma almost laughed. Go back to the scene of her humiliation? The place she had been so unceremoniously ejected from less than 24 hours ago? Absolutely not. Why would I ever go back there? "Because, Miss Carson," Mr. Morrison said, his gaze steady and serious, "my client believes a grave injustice has been done, and he is in a unique position to rectify it. I can promise you it will be very much worth your while." He slid his business card through the crack in the door. It landed softly on the floor. "My client is a very private man, but he is also a very determined one. We will wait in the car for 10 minutes. If you decide to come, we can resolve this today. If not, I will respect your decision, but you may be walking away from a significant opportunity." With that, he turned and walked back down the hallway. Emma watched through the peephole as he descended the stairs and got back into the limousine. She stood there, her mind a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a tiny flickering spark of curiosity. Every instinct screamed at her to lock the door and hide. It had to be a trick, a cruel joke, or some kind of scam. But then she looked at the expensive card on her floor. She looked at the bills on her kitchen table. She thought of Tyler's future. What was the worst that could happen? More humiliation. She had already hit rock bottom. And what if, by some 1,000,000-to-1 chance, this was real? What if this impeccably dressed lawyer was her only way out of the hole she was in? With a surge of adrenaline-fueled resolve, she kicked off the security chain. She had 10 minutes to change her life. Emma's hands shook as she threw on the nicest clothes she owned, a simple pair of black slacks and a clean, if slightly faded, blue blouse. She ran a brush through her hair and stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The same tired, worried face stared back at her, but there was a new, wild uncertainty in her eyes. This was either the smartest or the most foolish decision of her life. Walking out of the building and towards the waiting limousine felt surreal. The few neighbors still watching stared openly now, their expressions a mixture of awe and suspicion. Mr. Morrison stepped out and opened the rear door for her with a polite nod. The interior of the car was like another world. The scent of rich leather and polished wood filled the air. The seats were plush and deep, and the cabin was so silent that the noise of the city completely vanished. It was the kind of opulent luxury Emma had only ever seen in movies. The ride was short and conducted in a tense silence. Mr. Morrison sat opposite her, occasionally glancing at his phone, but he offered no further information. Emma's mind raced with possibilities, each one more unlikely than the last. Who was this mysterious client? Was it a witness from the cafe? A disgruntled former employee of Marcus's? The old man still seemed like the most logical connection, but the logistics were impossible. As they turned the final corner, her stomach lurched. There it was, the Dairy Haven Cafe. But the scene was different. Parked in front of it was another identical black limousine. Standing on the sidewalk next to the second limo were two figures. One was a sharp-looking woman in a business suit holding a tablet. The other made Emma's heart stop. It was the old man. But it wasn't. He was wearing the same charcoal gray wool coat, but it was now draped over the shoulders of the woman beside him. Underneath, he was dressed in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit that fit his frame with an understated elegance. His white hair and beard were still neatly trimmed, but he stood taller, straighter, his previous air of frail vulnerability completely gone. In its place was an aura of quiet, unshakable authority. He looked from the cafe to their approaching car, his pale blue eyes clear, intelligent, and piercing. The transformation was so staggering that Emma felt a wave of dizziness. Her lawyer, Mr. Morrison, seemed to notice her shock. "Allow me to formally introduce you to my client, Miss Carson," he said, his voice calm as their limousine glided to a stop behind the first. "Mr. William Thornton." The name meant nothing to her, but as Mr. Morrison opened her door and she stepped out onto the sidewalk, she knew her life was irrevocably tipping on its axis. William Thornton met her gaze. There was no trace of the vacant, weary man from the cafe. His eyes held a deep sadness, but also a profound strength and a hint of a gentle smile. "Miss Carson," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that was nothing like the silence she was used to from him. "Thank you for coming. I apologize for the theatricality of all this. But I felt a certain statement was necessary. Please allow me to introduce my lead counsel, Margaret Stevens." He gestured to the woman beside him, who gave Emma a brief, professional smile. Emma couldn't speak. She could only stare, her mind struggling to reconcile the shivering, destitute man from yesterday with the powerful, composed figure standing before her. I don't understand," she finally managed to say. Who are you?" A flicker of the familiar sadness crossed his face. "I am a man who has recently discovered he has far too much money and far too little of what truly matters," he said cryptically. He then turned his gaze to the front of the cafe. "Thornton Industries owns this building, Miss Carson, along with most of the other real estate on this block." Emma's jaw dropped. Thornton Industries. She had seen the name on plaques in the lobbies of downtown skyscrapers. They were one of the largest real estate and investment firms in the country. "And," William Thornton continued, his voice hardening slightly, "through a series of subsidiary corporations and investment portfolios, Thornton Industries is also the majority shareholder of the parent company that owns the entire Dairy Haven franchise." The world tilted. Emma gripped the car door for support. He didn't just own the building. He owned the whole thing. The milk, the cups, the counters, the uniforms. He owned Marcus Hartwell's job. He owned the job she had just been fired from. "For the past 6 months, since my wife passed away," Mr. Thornton said, his voice softening again as he looked at Emma with an unnerving intensity, "I have been revisiting the places that mattered to her. Simple places, a park bench, a library, this very cafe. She loved their honey vanilla milk steamers. I've been doing so without the usual trappings of my life. I wanted to see the world as she saw it. I wanted to see if the kindness and decency she always believed in still existed." He took a step closer. "Most of the time, I found nothing but indifference. People see an old man in a worn coat, and they look right through him. They see a liability, not a person." He paused, and his eyes held hers. "Until yesterday. Yesterday you saw a human being who was cold and in need. You sacrificed your own security for a simple act of compassion, an act my wife would have cherished." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as the full weight of the situation crashed down upon her. This was real. All of it. "And for that act," William Thornton finished, his voice now turning to cold steel as he looked past her towards the front door of the cafe, "you were punished. That is an outcome I find entirely unacceptable. Shall we go inside? I believe Mr. Hartwell is about to have a very educational morning." The bell above the door of the Dairy Haven Cafe tinkled, the same sound that had signaled Emma's miserable exit the day before. This time it announced an arrival that would shatter the cafe's mundane morning routine. Marcus Hartwell was behind the counter, berating a new trainee for putting too much foam on a milkshake. He looked up, annoyed by the interruption, and his face went through a rapid series of transformations. First confusion as he saw Emma, then a surge of indignant rage. Finally, utter paralyzing shock as he registered the 2 impeccably dressed lawyers and the imposing figure of William Thornton flanking her. "Carson, what is the meaning of this?" he sputtered, his voice cracking. I told you to vacate the premises. You are trespassing. I'm calling security. That won't be necessary, Mr. Hartwell, Richard Morrison said, his voice cutting through the air with the sharp authority of a judge's gavel. The few customers in the cafe fell silent, sensing the unfolding drama. William Thornton walked slowly toward the counter, his gaze sweeping over the cafe, not as a customer, but as an owner inspecting a flawed asset. He stopped directly in front of Marcus, his calm demeanor more intimidating than any overt threat. "Mr. Hartwell," William began, his voice quiet yet carrying to every corner of the room. "My name is William Thornton, and I own this company. All of it." Marcus's jaw worked, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving behind a pasty, clammy sheen. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost at his own trial. "I have spent the better part of 3 months frequenting this particular establishment," William continued. "I've sat in that corner and observed. I have observed the frantic, stressed-out energy of your staff. I have observed your condescending tone with them, and I have observed your complete lack of human courtesy, not only to me, but to anyone you deem beneath your station." Marcus stammered. I was just upholding company policy, sir. Mr. Thornton, sir, the manual is very clear about inventory control and loitering." Yes, the policy," William interrupted, a dangerous edge to his voice. "A shield for the cruel, a rule book for those who have forgotten how to be decent. Tell me, Mr. Hartwell, is there a policy against basic human kindness? Is it a fireable offense to offer a warm drink to a shivering man?" "It was theft," Marcus insisted, his desperation making him sound shrill. "She gave away company property. The rules—" "Let's talk about company property, shall we?" Margaret Stevens, the lead counsel, stepped forward, tapping her tablet. "Mr. Thornton's visit yesterday prompted us to initiate an immediate and thorough audit of this franchise's financials overnight. We've been very busy, Mr. Hartwell." She looked up from the tablet, her eyes cold and clinical. "We've found some interesting discrepancies. A consistent pattern of inventory voids, specifically for high-cost items like premium dairy products and artisanal syrups, that far exceeds the chain's average. These voids are always entered under your personal manager's code, often at the end of the day when no one else is here." Marcus began to sweat profusely. That's for spoilage, damaged goods. It's all accounted for." "Is it?" Ms. Stevens continued, relentless. "Because our preliminary investigation suggests that these spoiled goods have a habit of ending up for sale on online marketplaces. It seems while you were terrorizing your staff over a glass of milk, you've been systematically skimming thousands of dollars worth of inventory for months." The final nail was hammered into Marcus's coffin. His blustering facade crumbled completely, replaced by pure, undisguised terror. He looked from the lawyer's tablet to William Thornton's unyielding face. There was no escape. "This is a mistake, a misunderstanding," he whispered, clutching the edge of the counter. "No," William said, his voice low and final. "The mistake was mine for allowing a culture in my company where a man like you could thrive and a woman like Ms. Carson could be punished. That mistake is being corrected, starting now." He turned to Mr. Morrison. "Richard, please inform corporate security that Mr. Hartwell's employment is terminated, effective immediately. Have them escort him off the premises, and please coordinate with the district attorney's office. I imagine they will be very interested in Miss Stevens's audit." Marcus Hartwell looked at Emma, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading hatred. He had been so powerful, so untouchable just yesterday. Now he was ruined, exposed by the very person he had sought to crush. He opened his mouth, perhaps to curse at her, but no words came. Security officers, who had been waiting discreetly outside, entered the cafe and flanked him. Silently, they led the trembling, defeated manager away. The cafe was deathly quiet. The remaining staff and customers stared wide-eyed. William Thornton turned his back on the scene of Marcus's demise and faced Emma. The hardness in his eyes was gone, replaced by a gentle, weary warmth. "Now, Miss Carson," he said softly, "let's discuss your future." The heavy silence that descended upon the dairy haven after Marcus Hartwell's departure was thick with unspoken questions. The two remaining employees, Jake and the terrified new trainee, stood frozen behind the counter, looking at Emma as if she had single-handedly summoned a bolt of lightning from a clear sky. The few customers who had witnessed the entire drama were trying their best to appear engrossed in their phones or newspapers, but their furtive glances gave away their intense curiosity. The entire cafe seemed to be holding its breath. William Thornton's gaze softened as he turned away from the door through which Marcus had vanished. The icy authority he had worn like armor just moments before melted away, revealing the weary, kind-eyed man Emma had first seen. He looked at Emma, who was still standing by the counter, her mind a maelstrom of shock and disbelief. "Emma," he said, his voice now gentle, "would you join me for a moment over here?" He gestured towards a small table near the window, the very one where families sometimes sat, the one he used to watch with such profound longing. Numbly, as if moving through a dream, Emma walked to the table and sank into the chair he held out for her. Her legs felt weak, her hands trembled in her lap. Mr. Morrison and Ms. Stevens, ever the professionals, remained standing at a respectful distance near the door, a silent testament to the gravity of the meeting. For a long moment, William simply looked out the window, a wistful expression on his face. "My wife, Catherine," he began, his voice a low, reflective murmur. "She loved this specific cafe, not for the milk products, which she always said were mediocre at best." A faint, sad smile touched his lips. "She loved this table. She said it had the perfect view of the old clock tower on the courthouse. We sat here one rainy afternoon, much like yesterday, about a year ago. She was already sick then, though we didn't know how little time we had left. She spent an hour just watching people rush by, and she told me, 'William, everyone is in such a hurry to get somewhere else. They forget to be kind, right where they are.' She made me promise I would try to remember that." He turned his gaze back to Emma, his pale blue eyes holding a deep, resonant emotion. "After she passed, the world felt gray, colorless. All my money, my power, my influence, it couldn't fill the silence she left behind. So I started coming back to her places, wearing this old coat of mine, trying to see the world through her eyes again. I wanted to find that kindness she believed in." He sighed, a sound heavy with the weight of loneliness. "For months I found only what she feared. People in a hurry, too busy to see a person in need, until yesterday." He leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. "Emma, what you did was more than just giving a man a glass of milk. In my world, gestures are calculated. Kindness is often a transaction, a prelude to a request. It has been a very long time since I encountered something so genuine, so freely given, with no expectation of reward or recognition. You weren't just being nice. You were being brave. You risked your livelihood, the very thing that keeps a roof over your son's head, for a stranger. You honored my wife's memory without ever knowing her." Emma finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. I was just trying to do the right thing. He looked so cold." "That," William said, his voice firm with conviction, "is precisely the point. You didn't do it because I was William Thornton, the billionaire. You did it because you are Emma Carson, a woman of character and compassion." He sat back, his expression shifting from reflective to resolute. "Which is why I cannot simply give you your old job back. That would be an insult to what you endured and a disservice to your potential. This place," he said, gesturing around the cafe, "is fundamentally broken. It's been run on fear, suspicion, and a toxic adherence to policy over people. It needs more than a new manager. It needs a new heart. It needs a leader who understands that profit and decency are not mutually exclusive." He paused, letting his words sink in, his gaze steady and serious. I am offering you a new position. I want you to be the general manager of this franchise location. I want you to run it." The words hit Emma with the force of a physical impact. Manager? Her? A wave of dizziness washed over her. "Me?" she stammered, a bewildered laugh escaping her lips. "Mr. Thornton, with all due respect, I don't have any experience. I've never managed anything besides my own checkbook, and I don't even do that very well. I wouldn't know the first thing about ordering or payroll or anything." Her self-doubt, her constant companion for years, rose up like a wall. "You know how to treat people with respect. That is the first and most important qualification," he countered gently but firmly. "I didn't just watch you yesterday, Emma. I've been watching you for months. I saw how you handled the angry businessman who spilled his shake, cleaning it up with a calm smile. I saw you help an elderly woman read the menu when she'd forgotten her glasses. I saw you organize the pastry case with meticulous care. You have a natural grace and a quiet strength. The business acumen, the operational details. We will provide you with the best training money can buy. You'll have a direct line to my corporate team for support. Anything you need. I am not looking for an MBA, Emma. I am looking for a moral compass, and I have already found it." It was too much to process. Manager, a real salary, benefits, the ability to give Tyler the things he needed, the things she dreamed of providing. The tears she had shed in despair the night before returned, but this time they were tears of overwhelming, unbelievable gratitude. "But there's more," William continued softly, as if sensing he was already overwhelming her. "Mr. Keir?" Morrison stepped forward and discreetly placed a handsome leather-bound folder on the table. William pushed it gently toward her. "This is for your son, Tyler." Her hands trembling, Emma opened it. Inside were official notarized documents, thick and important. At the top of the first page, she saw the words, "The Tyler Carson Educational Trust." Her eyes scanned the legal jargon, but the meaning was clear. It was a fully funded trust account, established to cover every expense of Tyler's education. Private school if she chose, tutors, extracurriculars, all the way through a 4-year university degree anywhere in the country. It was a guarantee, a promise of a future free from the limitations she had fought against her entire life. Seeing her son's name on that document, so official and permanent, was what finally broke her composure. A sob, raw and cathartic, escaped her lips. It was the sound of years of fear and anxiety finally being released, of a burden she thought she would carry forever suddenly being lifted from her shoulders. I don't know what to say," she wept, looking up at the man who had, in the span of a single day, appeared as both a destitute stranger and a guardian angel. "This is too much." "It is nothing less than what your integrity has earned," William said, his voice thick with emotion. "All I ask is that you accept. Say you'll help me make this one small corner of the world a little warmer, a place Catherine would have been proud of." Through her tears, Emma nodded vigorously, a radiant, watery smile breaking through. "Yes," she whispered, the single word full of a lifetime of hope. "Yes. Of course. Thank you." William stood, his work now complete. "My team will be in touch this afternoon to handle all the formalities and to arrange for your training to begin whenever you're ready. Run this place your way, Emma. The keys are yours." With a final meaningful nod to her, William Thornton and his legal team turned and left the cafe. The bell tinkled softly one last time, signaling not an end, but a spectacular beginning. Emma remained at the table, her hands resting protectively on the folder that held her son's future. After a moment, Jake approached her table hesitantly. "Emma, what should we do?" She looked up at him and, for the first time, saw not just a co-worker, but her team. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and felt a new, unfamiliar confidence settle over her. "Jake," she said, her voice clear and steady, Why don't you and Maria close the cafe for the rest of the day? Paid, of course. We'll reopen tomorrow with a clean slate. She stood up and walked behind the counter, the space feeling both foreign and like home. She looked at the strict timer on the milk warmer, the one Marcus had worshipped. Her first official act was to unplug it. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Mrs. Patterson. "Everything okay, dear? Tyler is asking when you'll be home." Emma smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached her eyes and transformed her face. She typed back a reply, her fingers flying across the screen, each word a promise. "Everything is more than okay. Tell Tyler that Mommy's coming home soon and we're stopping for a new winter coat on the way, the best one in the store." She hit send, and as she looked out the window of her cafe at the city that had once seemed so cold and unforgiving, she didn't feel small or scared anymore. She felt like she finally belonged. Emma's story is a powerful reminder that the true measure of our character isn't found in grand gestures, but in the small, everyday choices we make, especially when no one is watching. Her simple act of kindness, born from empathy in the face of a cold and indifferent world, didn't just change her life. It exposed corruption and started a ripple effect of positive change. It teaches us that compassion is never a waste. You never know whose life you might touch, or how that single moment of grace might echo back into your own. If this story moved you, please take a moment to click the like button and share it with someone who might need a reminder of the power of kindness. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that prove that even in the toughest of times, humanity can and will shine through. Thank you for listening.